Hello, and welcome to this episode of Hear Their Voices. My name is Priscilla Ozodo Acevedo, and it's such a joy to be your host again on this new episode of HTV, the ICON podcast. For those of you joining us, ICON is the International Committee on Nigeria, and we are advocates for persecution and terrorism in Nigeria, advocates against persecution and terrorism in Nigeria. We fight for human rights and human dignity. So I am coming to you live today from the beautiful island of Puerto Rico. And let me tell you all, packing up my studio and bringing it to a different location and praying that everything works but I'm excited that we're here today, and it's going to be fun and exciting. I have a guest today, but before we go on, I do this every week. Pull out your phone and go to wherever you got your notification. If you're watching us on Facebook, you're watching us on YouTube, pull out your phone and let's share this, because I believe that you should not be the only one watching this. Say that to yourself. I should not be the only one watching this. I should share this with a friend. So find somebody. You can blast it to your entire network and just share. That's what I do. I click share and share it on my Facebook, or I share it to my WhatsApp status. But you can select specific people that you believe should know about this or are influential and have a voice in influencing the way things go in Nigeria. So specific people, or you might be like, I don't know anybody like that. Share it with your 5 closest friends. You should not be the only one watching this. So let's go on and click share as we continue on our episode. Okay, there we go. Go ahead. I'm waiting on y'all. Okay, so last week and the week before, we interviewed 2 very powerful women who have been involved in persecution themselves. We talked to Nagme, whose husband was arrested for his faith, and we talked to Miriam, whom herself was arrested and put in prison because of her Christian faith. She actually delivered one of her children in prison, and they talked to us about the power of our voice, the power of advocating for people. I'm excited about the guests that we have, but first of all, I have some announcements for you. So let's go to the announcements, okay? Our first announcement today, I'm excited to just really share with you that we are continuing with the hashtag Speak Up for Leah. Leah is not past tense. We didn't celebrate her birthday and put her in a corner. Hashtag Speak Up for Leah. We want to make sure that we're getting the noise out. So as we post things, we're consistently posting things. Please share them. That's the least we can do. Please share them and use the hashtag Speak Up for Leah. We want to get this viral. We want to get attention to people who can actually make a difference for Leah. So go ahead and continue using that hashtag. I also want to emphasize, as part of our announcements today, I had a conversation with one of you, and you were mentioning that, you missed the podcast, but this is on demand, y'all. You can go back and watch this on Facebook. You can go back and watch it on YouTube. But beyond that, you may not be able to sit down and watch it. We have this as a podcast on all your podcast avenues. So you can listen to it on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. You can also stream it on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, on Google Podcasts, on any of your podcast platforms. Just search for ICON HTV podcast. Okay, so this is exciting. That you don't just have to wait for when it's live, and if you miss it, oh, it's gone, there it goes. No, we have this on all of your podcast platforms. So if you listen to this on a podcast, share with us, leave a post, say, hey, I listened to this on the podcast and I loved it. Or, hey, I listened to this on the podcast and, this is how you can make it better. So we want to communicate. My final announcement is, let's stay connected. Let's stay together. I think that's a song. We want to hear from you. We want to build this podcast based on how you're receiving it. So leave us messages on Facebook and Instagram, on WhatsApp. We want you to continue the conversation, okay? And some of you may not be following us, and to you, I'm like, what are you waiting for? We're on Twitter. We're on Instagram as Icon Help One. We're on Facebook at Icon Help. We're on YouTube at Icon Help. Subscribe, click the notification bell, and make sure that you're receiving everything that we have. Okay? And now for the news of the week. Before I go into the news, I want to encourage you to subscribe at iconhelp.org to receive our news items every week. We send news headlines to you directly to your email. You can get this every week so that you can know how to pray, but not just you knowing how to pray. You and your church family and your organizations can know how to pray about these situations. Two stories are standing out to us today. The first one is there was a more recent kidnapping in Kaduna State, Nigeria, in the outskirts of Kaduna town. About 30, the numbers have been changing, but about 30 students were abducted by gunmen, by dozens of gunmen at Forestry College in Kaduna, which is northwest Nigeria. Now, today we are focusing our conversations on how students have been a target, and not just students as in children, but anybody in any form of education are being targeted. And we just want to call your attention that this is the first of that we know of, that I personally have engaged, the first of a higher education school institution being targeted by these gunmen. So far, we haven't gotten word that they've been released or any negotiations has happened. They are currently still being kidnapped. This news item was gotten from Al Jazeera. Second on the news, we got this news from Guardian.ng. This is a news article that is emphasizing that women are endangered species in northern Nigeria. This is a news item that I would like to call your attention to, and I will say definitely subscribe to us so that you can read the full news items. In the past, I will read the full news blurb to you, but we're realizing that we want to spend some more time with our guest interviewees today. So please take some time, Guardian.ng, or subscribe at iconhelp.org. And you can just click subscribe to our emails, and you will receive an email every week about the top news items regarding abductions, kidnappings, and terrorism in Nigeria. That is the news of the week. Thank you for engaging us with that. Okay, so I'm really excited to introduce you to our guest for today. I encountered our guest for the first time when we had our three hours for 3 years for Leah Sharibu, and she had just some awesome things to say. And I got interested in the work that she was doing, and it's such a joy that we've been able to bring her here. Our guest today is Kaneng Rwang Pam. She's the Executive Director of the KRP Foundation for Education and Migration Awareness. She's a member of the Child Protection Network. She's the National Treasurer of the Network Against Child Trafficking, Abuse, and Labor, NACTAL. She's a trained counselor and psychological support first aid responder and trainer. Please join me, HTV family, to welcome Kaneng into the studio.
Glad to be here.
Thanks for being with us. Thank you for your time and for your work. I'm so excited to finally get you here in the studio with us. So first things first, tell us about you. I know I personally don't know you as well, but I know our audience may not have met you. Tell us about who you are. How did you get into this kind of work, advocating for the child and protection of children against child trafficking?
Okay, my name is Kaneng Rwang Pam. As you said, I am the Executive Director of the KRP Foundation for Education and Migration Awareness. And I am a media practitioner, communications consultant, and development consultant. And yes, child rights advocate or child protection advocate. I am a mom, but probably the biggest inspirations or motivations came from my media practice, working with colleagues who needed some airtime to air out some campaigns, some advocacy messages. And a friend of mine, a really close friend, Anna Bok, of formerly of the Media Village, was
Yes.
in the Netherlands. Familiar name, right? She was in the
Mm-hmm.
Netherlands along with Treasure Durodola, another colleague of ours, on some training, media training, and they got into the city on some field work, and were moved by pictures of Nigerian girls they saw. They saw young ladies in show glasses like mannequins for prostitution, basically, or sex trafficking. And they thought something should be done. So they drew up a proposal and approached the German Foreign Ministry, which agreed to do some kind of intervention and basically to build the capacities of media practitioners, both in Nigeria and Germany, so that we can actively investigate these issues and begin to create public awareness. So she bounced that off me, and I was co-opted into the organizing group, and we both participated in the additional trainings at the Deutsche Welle Academy in Germany. So
Wow.
we met up with a group of German journalists. Some are online new media journalists, some are traditional media journalists. And we decided to work both and in Germany. So after going through several weeks of trainings, we got into the field and began to actively investigate issues. And we went to Nim, Nigeria, Edo State in Nigeria, and mapped out about 4 villages where we were able to document a number of stories. And we actually produced documentaries looking at the human trafficking value chain. So what human trafficking really is. And why are people so vulnerable, and mapping out the demographics that are most vulnerable, which are women and children, young girls.
Yeah.
And we got talking to various kinds of stakeholders. We looked at even the juju angle, why people are asked to swear oaths, and the role of our traditional and cultural and even religious practices in perpetrating or driving this trade in human exploitation. So that's where the journey really began for me, because at each stage of the process, from getting more educated to being in the fields to investigating to carrying out outreaches, it was huge learning at each phase. It was like layered, one experience dovetailing into the next, and it was just more and more knowledge and more awareness for me. And so I came to, along with several other colleagues, realizing the urgent need to do a little bit more, especially even in North Central Nigeria. So I set up this small NGO. I have a passion for education. And education is where society provides equal opportunity. And I've also been concerned about the increasing number of out-of-school kids in Nigeria. Now, education is where society provides equal opportunity. Without education, young people cannot question their environments. They will be disenfranchised. They will be disempowered. And so we started running some interventions in that regard. We conduct spelling bees. We design co-curricular programs. But the other component of what we do is the migration awareness, where we engage especially young people. Something we learned in the field, especially after encountering repatriated individuals or people who were once trafficked, or people who we met, Nigerians, especially in Germany and other countries in Europe, who are already in really, really precarious situations. We went to some shelters and safe houses, and it's heartbreaking. We were traumatized just experiencing their traumas through their eyes. And we realized that when people are that damaged, they can get a lot of therapy, counseling, and psychosocial support generally, but they never really come back to functioning 100% perfectly normal as they did in the past. So we realized,
I love
for me,
I love that you said that, because just because of the situations we've been talking about in Nigeria, and about, they're like, they kidnap these kids and they're back, and people think they're back to normal. And we realize that they never fully come back. You've touched on a few things that really stood out to me, particularly education and the danger of the Nigerian women and children. Today we are kind of focusing on children, But when you heard about Leah, how did you connect it to your work? Because you're working a lot with migration awareness and people that are being kidnapped through, but through invitation to migrate to a different country and are being kidnapped into human and sex trafficking. But when you think of a story like Leah, that she was taken from school, how do you relate that? Do you put this in the category of human and sex trafficking as well, considering that she's probably been married
Absolutely.
off? Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. My I wouldn't say epiphany, but my pain rather increased, or burden increased, when myself and the rest of the world woke up to the abduction of the Chibok girls. And I tried to carry out investigations, some very private investigations, where I, unfortunately, I'm unable to publish all my findings, but in very private circles, I've been able to share some. Last time was actually last night in a meeting of stakeholders, that
Mm,
this is the abduction of the girls is a typical human trafficking scenario. Abduction falls into that category because there's
mm,
forced slavery, there's forced sex slavery,
mm,
there is child marriage
mm,
involved. And a lot of people don't seem to be aware of the realities, our realities of human trafficking, what drives human trafficking, and what feeds human trafficking, and what it fits into. So,
mm.
with the abduction of the Chibok girls, my narrative, along with several colleagues, to a lot of people, is this is a case of human trafficking. It
Yeah.
is. It is. Many times people are tricked into being moved to different locations for the purposes of exploitation, but it's more precarious when you find that the individuals are taken by force. It's even more traumatizing. Well,
Yes.
a few years down the line, we were still brooding over the girls that haven't all been returned, and some
Mm-hmm.
speculated to have been or assumed dead. Then the Dapchi girls abduction happened, where Leah was taken. And it was,
Mm,
oh my goodness, not again, not again.
mm,
There's a lot that goes through the mind of an individual who goes through that. From the little psychology, neuro-linguistic programming branch of psychology that we often use in our work, that I learned, we never lose an opportunity to make people try to understand that what makes a human being has basically three components. One is the environment the person is brought up in. Two, the person's upbringing, which has to
mm-hmm,
do with values at home and worldview of the immediate family. And three,
mm-hmm,
significant emotional experiences. These three make people who they are and help us define what our filters are. Our filters are our values, our beliefs, our memories, our meta programming, everything about us. Now, these young ladies most likely had a lot of love around their families. They had stability. They were going to school, but with this significant emotional experience of being adopted, even for the girls who were returned, it changes their entire programming. And there's so
yeah,
many things
it
we wouldn't
does.
see or know, but it does. It changes their worldview. They've seen what their parents haven't even seen. They have experienced the kind of fear that even 90-year-olds have not experienced. And it
Yeah,
changes who they are, right? So now it gets worse when you think of a little girl who is still in that situation.
yeah,
And you every day you wonder how resilient children can be. Resilient, we as Nigerians are very resilient, and I believe
yes.
it partially is the resilience that's keeping her alive, because somebody would
Mm-hmm,
have probably tried to take her own life, or she would have just shut down, gone into shock and
mm-hmm.
passed out, and never come back. So yes, she is resilient.
Oh, I think we're having some technical difficulties. As we struggle to get Kaneng back, I just want to emphasize some of the things she said. She talked about how education is the key to a lot of what is happening in Nigeria, but I'm realizing, particularly with the news we've been receiving, education is exactly what these terrorists are attacking. Education is precisely what these terrorists are coming against. And we collectively, as a people, as a voice, need to raise a voice against these terrorist activities that are targeting the education of our children. The other thing she brought attention to that I wanted her to talk a little bit more on, apart from the education, was the fact that the trauma that a lot of these victims have gone through stays with them long term. And the question I keep asking is, what is the trauma care? How many trauma first aid people do we have in Nigeria that can actually care for these families? Who is speaking to the girls that have been returned? It's great to have you back, Kaneng. I'm
Thank you. Good to
excited.
be back.
Yes, I wanted you to just speak a little bit into the attack on education in Nigeria. That you had said a little bit that the cure, the answer is education for the children. And you do a lot of work, but we've seen this terrorists, Boko Haram, and the Fulani militants, and all the gangs attacking particularly schools, because for them, education is where they should target. Can you speak a little bit to why we should fight for the education of the children?
Well, thank you, Priscilla. It's very obvious. Education, like I said, is where society provides equal opportunity. With education, children can question their environments, they can make their lives better, they can do better than we are doing in our generation. So it's a tragedy and a direct attempt to sabotage, at the same time, mortgage the future of this country and, in effect, the future of an important part of the world. So the children are easily targeted because they're younger, they have less muzzle to fight. And unfortunately, with this attack on education, we suffer two things. There's the loss of learning, which could be temporary for many. And there's also fear in families. And it also has that negative impact. It puts a strain on families. Just day before yesterday at a conference here where I am, a report came in that some parents in different parts of the country are actually saying, you know what, they don't think their kids are safe in school anymore. So we're beginning to see a situation where parents are just saying, you know what, we're not taking our kids to school. Yes, there could be an opportunity for homeschooling, but that's a whole different process. And it also requires resources.
Yeah, it's particularly precarious. Yeah, I was thinking about that homeschooling thing too, Kaneng, and I was going to say it's particularly precarious when the parents who were sending their kids to school because they couldn't go to school, who don't have an education themselves, how can they homeschool their kids? So it's raising a second generation of children who are not educated,
illiterate. Exactly. Even for educated families or educated Nigerians, homeschooling is not even an option because, maybe I work in a bank or I have to go out and get money so we can continue the living. Our livelihood is supported by what I do. We need to pay bills, we need shelter and all the basics. So it's not even an option for many parents right now. So COVID-19 came, and of course it created a huge learning gap, especially between kids of the haves and the have-nots. And we see the pattern of attacks. Most of the schools that are being attacked are schools that attract mostly those at the bottom of the pyramid, not the upper class, definitely, right? Not those who can hire private security, and go fight and get their children back. No, it's usually children of the lower middle class, if we have anything like that, down to the lower class, those who lack the resources to even lobby for any kind of attention, except for perhaps what you and I are doing, using our voices to amplify the need to step into the situation, intervene, respond, and perhaps prevent where we can. So it's a double tragedy, really. It's a double tragedy.
Yeah, it really is. I want you to speak a little bit more into that, because one of the things we've been screaming at the top of our lungs is for our audience, our viewers, to add their voices to this tragedy, to get the word out there. Can you just, coming from a Nigerian who has experienced stories after story after story, you've investigated this situation, can you just add your voice to the plea to our viewers to spread this word about what's going on in Nigeria?
Okay, so Nigeria is a beautiful country. We believe in it. Nigeria continues to create wealth legally for many people, especially in places like Lagos, one of the largest economies in Africa. Nigeria sits on a huge potential to be awesome, to be great, to be a world power, if you like. However, our current situation is precarious. The insecurity is increasing. The economic push factors are also increasing. Uh, there are new opportunities, business opportunities for even young people to get into crimes. So we're experiencing crime and criminality. The spate of kidnapping is unprecedented. The average Nigerian doesn't feel safe at work or at play or wherever they socialize. And children are even in a worse situation because their parents cannot provide the adequate protection that they need 24 hours a day. We recently lost a lawyer, female lawyer in her late 20s, who was shot because kidnappers came to her house and she tried to take her little girl, who was probably 3 years old, and she was just worried about what the girl will go through, the rape or the torment, and trying to pull back the girl. They just shot her dead and took up with the girl, and a ransom still had to be paid before the girl was received. And this is happening in the Jos area, Middle Belt, places where this was taboo. This was unheard of in fact, a decade ago. This was not the norm, but now it is happening across the country. And we could go on and on about the different kinds of crimes and criminalities that are threatening the very existence of the average Nigerian. So we need to be able to change things. We need to change the narrative. A few friends were saying yesterday, you know what? Young people are beginning to give us feedback that they would rather leave the country than stay. Throughout this week, from conference after conference and meeting after meeting, it's the same thing. So now we see there's a wave. We're fighting against irregular migration, yet the country is becoming really unbearable for especially young people who lack resources to just have the basics of life and feel they don't have a voice. Think of the NSARS riots. They'd had enough to some point, and unfortunately, we feel it was hijacked, it was sabotaged. But that the NSARS demonstrations, I beg your pardon, not riots, demonstrations, showed the world the heartbeat of the average Nigerian youth, that we are in a precarious situation. And I've been saying for about 20 years that we're sitting on a ticking time bomb because we have an expanding youth population. However, we're not creating opportunities for them to thrive. Then now children are targets in their own way by just being abducted, being tortured, being raped, being killed. It's as if all ages, especially between the youth and children, are very dispensable to very negative forces and elements that are operating in our country. Is it possible to have a utopian society in Nigeria? We believe so, but that completely depends on the actions that you and I take in terms of sensitization, awareness, protection, and responding to some of these issues. We need value reorientation in our society. We need to have young people especially know that this is not the way to go. The latest intelligence we're receiving is that university and some high school gangs and cults are actually in on the trade of human trafficking, in on the kidnapping menace, because they form mercenaries who are hired to do some of these dirty jobs. We hear some were probably perpetrated by politicians in some places who decided to arm certain groups or gangs to either terrorize or just instill fear in their opponents, and well, after the elections, these young people are still armed and they're wondering, okay, so what do? We have arms and we need a little more money, so just get into the neighborhoods, into the community, into the society, and just take what we want, which has created another problem. So these are some of the dynamics, but we can reverse it. We've traveled, some of us have been to countries where you drop a bag in a shop, you come back and you find it right there. You forget a package somewhere, you go back, you find it. Or if there's a number, you get a call and you're told you left something. There's that level of safety and security, and we
want that for Nigeria.
Exactly. Exactly.
Sorry. It's so hard. I'm just receiving word to say, what would you say is the biggest insecurity or biggest effect of
Source.
this, everything you've said, for particularly for
Mhm.
women and children before they're
Mhm.
abducted or after they're abducted? What would you say the effects of these attacks on women, particularly our children,
Mhm.
especially because you've worked with some of this psychological counseling and first aid? um, how has it affected children? How is it affecting children before and after attacks, right now in Nigeria? What's the biggest
Okay.
insecurity?
Well, the source would be kidnapping. That's the biggest thing that people are afraid of now. Before an attack, whether it's a communal conflict or the usual herdsmen or unknown gunmen attacks and
Mhm.
raids on communities, before that, everyone is aware it's happening in different places. So children are afraid. Children are not sure if they go to school, they'll come back. Children in a part of Jos where I live are used to hearing gunshots, and they
Yeah.
know something is happening. And each time it happens, it's just a deeper sense of fear that grips the children. And of course, women who are probably mothers are concerned for themselves and mostly concerned for the safety of their own children, concerned about the safety of their husbands and brothers, who the typical pattern in a place like Jaws is the men step out and say, what's happening? Who's shooting? Pick your
Mm,
sticks and stones and let's defend our neighborhood. Let's defend our.
mhm,
So there's that fear before anything breaks out. We don't know when it's going to happen next. You hear a
mm,
gunshot, you don't know. You don't know whether it's a police patrol, military patrol, or it's just someone starting trouble.
yeah.
We received some information that there was a protest, a peaceful protest going on to call government's attention to the plight of youth, to change things and end police brutality. Then all of a sudden, churches were being burned, Christians were being attacked. Okay, so it took a religious dimension, right? But
Mhm.
it succeeded in distracting, in dividing the youth to start with, and communities, and distracting from attention, moving attention away from the real issues to now, the religious dimension, which are basically part of the hotbed of what the entire country is now sitting on, especially in the north central, northeast, and northwest. So you
Yeah.
have this general sense of fear already existing right
Mm,
now. There are children who are born into this who don't know any other way to live. They can't
yeah.
imagine a place where you stay and there's no fear of being attacked. So you have
Mm,
that, which has a psychological effect on
mhm,
even the countenance of the young
yeah.
people and women. Yes, and the way we socialize as well. Of course, society has become very polarized along especially religious lines, along ethnic lines. So, this person is Igbo, that one is Hausa, this one is Fulani,
Mm,
all that. And you have young children seeing these, and sometimes they're reinforcing these negative reinforcing loops or narratives with their
yeah.
friends, or the way they interact. We hate you because you're Muslim, or because you're Christian. We're creating very negative paradigms and stereotypes. Now, for
Yes.
after attacks, when attacks do happen, whether they're abductions or whether they're raids on villages or communities, the effect is deeply, deeply traumatizing. It's a combination of fear and sadness, a deeper
Mm,
sense of fear and sadness, and that easily leads to depression. And
yeah.
depression, simply put, is a deep sense of sadness that
Yeah.
can lead people to exploring very disempowering coping mechanisms. It could
Yeah.
be trying to meet the same kind of violence on somebody else,
Mm,
or trying to self-harm using objects, or maybe getting into drugs. So it just comes with its own sets of problems. But these are the effects, because we're seeing children experimenting with drugs at an early age. There's a young girl who was raped at 9, abused by family members, and eventually just started taking drugs. She is one of about 12 different cases that we've had to deal with ourselves and
wow.
other organizations in our networks. Yes. So you find that it completely distorts the thinking, the programming
Yeah.
of the individual. And normalcy is not what we know as normal. The new normal is just
Yeah.
go with the flow. So, well, this girl became addicted to drugs, and at 13, she got pregnant. She was not sure if her father was responsible for the pregnancy, or if the drug dealer was responsible for the pregnancy,
Mm,
or and she also shares her values with people in her circles. So the before
Yeah.
and after effects are negative on different levels: the social level, the psychological level, the spiritual level. It's a huge challenge, especially for, I will speak for Christians who are
Yeah.
counselors.
Yeah.
We've gone through a training called trauma counseling using the Beatitudes, where you can try to reverse
Yeah.
the path that leads people to depression
Yes.
due to trauma, using the
Mm.
Beatitudes, because it's a similar loop that gets people into that state after being
Yeah.
traumatized from any of
Yeah.
these experiences, whether it's a conflict or an attack on an
Yeah.
individual as a child
Yeah.
or as a woman. The person feels a sense of failure. The person feels, because
Yeah.
people sometimes feel maybe they're responsible for what happened to them. Whatever it
Yeah.
is, of course, it's natural to begin to imagine, what could I have done to change things? Was I in the
Yeah.
wrong place at the wrong time? Or is it what
Yeah.
I said, how I looked? People. So there's also that point of self blame. And unfortunately, for people of faith, it is believed that, well, negative forces and evil forces
Yeah.
leverage on that to keep reinforcing it in the mind of the person. It's your fault. It's your fault. So, maybe you should take drugs or take a drink or do something bad. Then that
Mm.
person does something negative, realizes, oh my gosh, what did I do? God must really hate me
Mm.
now. God cannot
Yeah.
love me. Then it's a deeper sense of sadness.
Yeah.
And it comes back to, okay, maybe I should just take a little more, do a little more of that thing that I
Mm.
was doing to cope. And
I'm
it just
sorry,
goes deeper and
Kaneng.
deeper.
I'm sorry, I have to cut you short. We're running out of time, and I really want our audience to get your information. And thank you for those. I just want, before I do that, I want to call our viewers to three things you said. You said there's a lot of emotional trauma, there's fear that leads people to stay away from education, and those are some of the effects. And thank you for bringing attention to that. There's also adverse effects like going into drugs and stuff like that. Those are the ways that our children are being affected. But before you go, Kaneng, I didn't want us to keep going and not be able to ask you, how can people find you on social media, your email? What are some things that how can our audience connect with you and your work?
Okay, well, I am on at RP Kaneng. That's for Twitter, at RP Kaneng.
Are there?
As an individual, then as a group, we are at KRP FEMA underscore NG, KRP FEMA, FEMA being FEMA underscore NG. Then you can also find us at BIHA Project, which is BIHA Project, one word. Yes, on Twitter as well. And you can see some of the previous work we've done. You can see pictures of some of our outreaches. We're trying to empower communities with knowledge, build the skills of kids, even in how to protect themselves, like in martial arts, and trying to strengthen families as much as possible. Then for
That's great.
email, just krpfema2010@gmail.com is our official mailbox. If you send us an email, we'll be able to respond to you. We are building a community of first responders, as we call them, and they're from different countries. We have a WhatsApp group where we share what we do, where we even share cases and interventions. We have lawyers in that group and psychologists and media people in the group. We're trying to build a stronger response network. That's
Yeah.
the best way we
Yeah.
can fight what we have and begin to reverse some of the trends, because we don't have any other country to call home. We don't have anywhere else to go. There's just too much of good stuff that we have here. We're endowed. Who are we going to leave all the lands for? No, we should be here to try to get things right while we are providing adequate protection for especially children who are really very vulnerable, who are suffering as a result of cultural problems,
Yeah.
negative practices, and the societal problems that we're facing now. The poor
Yeah.
economic state of the country is also having a big impact on them. They're the most vulnerable.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us at this time. I'm anticipating there'll be a part 2 conversation because we don't even have enough time. Thank you for your work that you are doing. I'm grateful for the ways that you're allowing yourself to be used, fighting for Nigeria and for against human trafficking and for the children of Nigeria. So let us know how we can get involved. We'll definitely stay in touch. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Please protect children around you. It's their right.
Amen.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. And thank you all so much for joining us. Yes, yes, that was some good stuff. I know we've gone a little longer than we usually do, but that was some great stuff. Let's stay connected. Stay connected with Kaneng. She's just a fireball, and I want to learn more about her work and her passion. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, um, YouTube. The same things I've been saying. Share our posts share our posts and let's get active. I think if there's anything I took away is let's get active in the things we say are important to us. What are you doing today to fight for children in Nigeria who are vulnerable, who are being pulled out of school because they don't feel safe? What can you do today? You can share this video. You can go to iconhelp.org and receive information and news. You can read about all that's going on. You can give. You can donate. You can get together a prayer group to give. You can share this video. We're still sharing the 3 candles video with Leah Sharibu to say, let's get the word out. This is always on our Instagram pages and Facebook. Let's share it as many times as possible and get the world to bring Leah back home. My name again is Priscilla Ozodo Acevedo. It's been a joy to be with you on this episode. I'm broadcasting live from Puerto Rico, and I'm glad the internet stayed connected the whole time. Let's get together. Blessings. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your week.